it's very hard to be a good salesman. It's a very, very difficult job. Now, you can be spectacularly successful at it. And if you are, you're unbelievably useful and you'll be in demand like you can't believe. But it's very hard. And you have to have a pretty damn thick skin because there's a lot of, no, I'm not interested in sales, right? It's like, what, 90% that or 95%? So, you know, you gotta be fortified pretty well against a whole array of obstacles. And then to be a really successful salesperson, you got to conduct yourself extraordinarily well across a long period of time. And so it can be an extraordinarily admirable and difficult enterprise.
Is it cool if I just direct some questions?
Go ahead, man. Go ahead. Have at her.
Selfish here. I'm being selfish.
You have to justify it with the quality of the questions.
Okay. You seem to have a lot of intellect, obviously. Like you've done a lot of the thinking brain. How do you balance the difference between heart mind and head mind, where you often stay in thought versus like your soul?
You do that mostly in relationship to other people. You know, like our culture suffers from this delusion that most of you psychologically is inside you. It's like that's just not true at all. You know, if you want to practice love, you do that by having a relationship with someone, right? It's something you act out. And so you keep yourself grounded that way too. And so yeah, it's been very helpful for me to be able to think things through. And I've had great teachers, and I'm fortunate enough, you know, to be able to benefit from the reading that I've done. But it's certainly the case that much of what keeps me oriented in the world is the network of my relationships, you know, and that's not exactly psychological, is it? I mean, I have to act in a way that maintains those relationships and adopt the right attitude, but it's not psychological. It's having a wife isn't psychological. There's psychological elements to it. It's just, and the same with children. And you know, it's also the case, this is useful to know too, because people think, I don't want to take on too much familial responsibility because I'll compromise my freedom. It's like, you want to compromise that freedom with responsibility because it orders the freedom, right? It'll force you. It's virtually impossible to grow up before you have children. And people hate that idea. It's like, I don't care if you hate it, that's tough luck. There's other ways you can grow up, you know. You can take care of someone deeply who isn't a child. But you don't grow up till someone's more important than you. And it's very hard to have that happen if it isn't a child. Even if you love someone, a partner, you know, the probability that, are they more important than you? Possibly. They're equally as important as you. A child, if you have any sense at all, it's just hands down, there's no question. They're way more important than you. You lay your life down for them. And so, and that grows you up. And that's not psychological either, right? Yeah. And that puts you in the world, and you need to be put in the world. There's no such thing as freedom without responsibility. So I just did this seminar in Exodus. It was in Miami. Just finished it off. It's on the Daily Wire, but we're going to release it free on YouTube here pretty soon. So pretty happy about that. And the story of Exodus contrasts three different modes of being. One is life under tyranny. That's slavery, obviously. And you could be a slave of a state tyrant, or you could be a slave of your own tyranny, right? So you could be a slave, you could be a tyrant. So one mode of being is subservience to a tyrant. Another mode of being is life in the desert, and that's what happens to the Israelites when they flee from the tyranny. You think, well, you get rid of the tyranny, everything's great, you got freedom. It's like, yeah, it's the freedom of the desert. You don't know which way you're going, you're going to wander around for 40 years not knowing which way is up. And that's modern people, because modern people think everything's a tyranny, and so they want to flee, and they want to flee into the realm of absolute freedom, and they don't know that's the desert. That's not helpful. When you can just do whatever you want at any time, you think, oh, how could I have anything better than that? It's like, now you just drown in that. You know, anyway, some of you have had pets. It's like, what's your dog like if it can just do whatever it wants? It's like nobody even wants to go to your house because your dog is so stupid. You know, it jumps up on everyone and bites them, and it whines. It's just useless. Well, that's a dog with freedom. You think, well, I'm not a dog. It's like, dogs are all right, you know, first of all, and they're a lot like people, which is why we can get along with them. And it's ordered freedom you're after, not freedom. And ordered freedom, that's actually Mount Sinai. That's the revelation of the commandments and the principles of life. And, you know, you adopt responsibility, and the more the better, because it orders your freedom, and then it opens up realms of possibility that you would have never had. You know, like if you learn to play the piano, there's a bunch of things you don't get to do anymore. You can't, you know, smash your arm down on the keyboard. That's not music. There's all sorts of limitations, but not really, because once you grasp the principles, well, you're free to make music, and you didn't have that before you accepted the principles. And so life is a game. That's a good way of thinking about it. Life is a game, and games have rules, and you want the best set of rules possible, but not no rules. How can you play a game with no rules? Why would you want to? It's just chaos. And so responsibility, you know, you find ordered freedom in responsibility, and so pile it on, man. Meaning in responsibility. That's the antidote to the miasma of modern life. And hardly anybody understands that. So it's a really good thing to know. It's a really good thing to know. So
that was all fire.
Thank you, sir.
Bro talk, fire. One of the things that I think a lot of times we struggle with is we get attacked with a lot of criticism. I know your polarity is strong, right? Like you have the people who hate you and the people who love you, and you get a lot of noise and adversity come at you. What do you do to help yourself internally really process some of the noise and stay true in your essence?
Well, my family is very helpful in that regard, and I have people around me who are good counselors, and they're wise people. And we do, well, first of all, we try to make everything as clear as possible, right? So every time I've been under attack, all I do is just tell everybody what's going on. And I can do that because I'm actually not afraid to tell everybody what's going on, because I'm not doing anything crooked. You know, maybe now and then accidentally, and everybody makes mistakes, but fundamentally I'm playing a straight game, and so I can just reveal to everyone what's happening. And then also, like, it's hard, right? Because you might say, tell the truth. Telling the truth is very hard, because maybe I could reveal some truths about you that were true, but I did it to hurt you. Well, then that's not true. Like, the mere facts of the matter are true, but I selected them in a way that's not in accordance with the truth. And so what I also do, like I'm under attack right now by the Canadian College of or the Ontario College of Psychologists. They want to take away my license. And they have 13 different legal actions out against me at the moment. And I was really enraged by it. I mean, they really gave me a hard time in 2017. It was really brutal for reasons I won't go into. And they've been on my case nonstop for 6 years. And there's a part of me that would, you know, I'm very, very displeased by their actions, you know, and I'm certainly not someone who's utterly incapable of doing reprehensible things. And so I have some pretty dark ideas about just exactly like how I'd like to conduct this bit of warfare. But, you know, it's not helpful. It's not helpful. Like, to have that voice that's counseling mayhem is very useful. You want that on your side, but then you got to think, all right, if I could get the best possible outcome out of this, if I had my head screwed on straight, what would that outcome look like? And that usually means you have to abandon your desire, not for justice, but for revenge, you know. And you have to abandon your desire for mayhem, even though you might be perfectly pleased if a little bit of it came along, you know. You got to have some counsel from that dark side, but not let it dominate. And my family, because we've been through these sorts of things dozens of times now, we've got pretty good at being able to talk and adopt the right perspective, you know, which is one of minimal necessary force, let's say, minimal necessary emotion, and the attempt to bring about the desired goal, all things considered. So like with the college, for example, the dark part of me would like to lay their offices to waste. A more moderate part would like them all to resign, and there's a large part of me that thinks we'll see who ends up without a job after ashes settle. But that's still not good, because there's an element of it that's too personal, you know. So it's better than the first option, but it's not maybe as good as an ideal. What would be ideal? Well, my family has formulated this over the last week. It's like, well, they should drop the actions. They should announce that their processes hadn't been updated in recent years to take into account the new reality of widespread social media. They need to implement a new set of rules, and they're going to work to do that. And, you know, there's no vengefulness in that. There's no victory. There's just an improvement, and what would you call it? An incremental improvement in the workings of a bureaucratic system. And that's like good enough, you know, and you need to know what's good enough. And you need to be grateful if you can get just what's good enough. Because, like, do I want to be in a battle with the Ontario College of Psychologists for the next 10 years? I can't imagine anything duller and, you know, less useful than that. Even if it would satisfy, you know, a dark part of my soul, it's not. And the victory as well, it's not everything it could be.
So let's hypothetically say, you just said, fine, take away my license. Would that be the end of the world for you? Like, you have such a big presence now, and you have such a good...
Oh, no. Well, this is part of the reason that I can actually undertake this battle, is because I'm positioned. There isn't really... They can't take me out. You know, and I have colleagues, physician colleagues, let's say, and other psychologists who are very afraid of the colleges because they're financially dependent on their profession, and they don't want their reputation sullied. So the college could harm my reputation, and that's what they want to do, or part of them wants to do anyways. They've already announced, if you look me up on the Ontario Psychologist website, you'll see that I've already been sentenced to these disciplinary actions, and so the implications of that are clear. Like, I'm supposed to submit to this re-education process, and the implication is that, you know, I've conducted myself disgracefully. So they've already got that, and they can expand that, and that will have some effect on me, because there will be people who think, lots of people who think, well, there was 13 complaints, and where there's smoke, there's fire. He's probably doing something underhanded, and I'm not willing to allow them that luxury. But also, the other part of it is, this was a very difficult license to obtain. It's very hard to become a licensed clinical psychologist. It takes 8 years of study and apprenticeship, and then thousands of hours of clinical practice after that. And they're not taking it from me. Now, could I give it up? Hypothetically, but I'm certainly not giving it up because hyenas are pulling the bones away from me. So
this is why I asked the question, because I feel like a lot of us as business entrepreneurs, door-to-door sales guys, we deal with a lot of like adversity, lawsuits, reps doing this, cities saying this, and, you know, at what point do you fight these battles versus just like give? So, you know what I mean? It's like there's so much application.
Yeah, well, that's partly why, you know, there's no rule of thumb for that, right? When do you persist and when do you take another course? It's like, if you knew the answer to that, you know how to live, right? Because it's very complicated. So it's more, you need an answer of process. So let's say you're in a complicated situation and you have to make a complicated decision. The first question is, can you trust your own judgment? And the answer is, well, if you've lied to yourself for 30 years about everything, the answer to that is no. And so you're going to fall into a pit right away. So this is another reason why you want to do everything you can not to lie, because there will come a time when, if you habitually lie, you won't be able to trust your judgment exactly when you need to be able to trust your judgment. And then you'll be done. And that will absolutely 100% happen to you. So you need to know that. And then there may also come a time when, even if your head is clear, if your eyes are clear and your head is screwed on straight, you're still not wise enough to know what to do. And then, well, you got people around you, right? You got your family, hopefully they're on board with you. You've got your friends, you've got your business partners, and then you talk to them and you analyze the problem, and you lay out a strategy, and you try to see your way through. And that's also part of so what you do, because there'll be problems coming at you that you don't know how to solve, what you want to do is turn yourself into someone who's clear-headed enough and well-situated enough so that you can solve problems when they come along. And that's actually the solution. There's no other magic solution, because a problem solving a problem usually involves balancing a lot of complicated spinning plates, right? You have to do a lot of specific right things together at the same time, and each situation differs quite substantially. And so, you know, how do you keep the plate spinning? The answer is you become a master plate spinner. You know, it can't be. That's why that's why there's an emphasis in religious traditions that are solid on spiritual development, because the true development of the spirit is the development of yourself into, well, a dragon slayer. That's one way of thinking about it. A good way of thinking about it. That's not all. Slayer of giants, right? A peacemaker. All of those things are part of the central archetype of the embattled but successful hero. And that's reality, man. That's not some child's fairy tale. Quite the contrary. Or maybe it is a child's fairy tale. That's why children like it. You know, they're wise in their attempt to move forward and develop. They need to know how to become, you know, formidable slayers of serpents. That's for sure. Especially the serpents that live inside you. Especially that. So.
Love that. Okay, so we only have a couple more minutes left.
Okay.
Honestly, I really do appreciate, one, the time on stage, two, just the time with these guys. So I'm just going to go rapid fire a couple questions.
Okay.
3 most influential books in your life.
You could read Man's Search for Meaning. That's Viktor Frankl. That's a great book. It's very clearly written. It's not very long. It's an account of Frankl's journey through the concentration camps in Nazi Germany. It's brilliant. I can't think of a book that's, you know, it's pitched at an accessible level, which just means that it's extraordinarily clearly written and no more complex than it needs to be. It's an elegant book. It's a gripping book. And, you know, you work your way through that, you'll have read a book. That's a major book. Carl Jung wrote a book called Modern Man in Search of a Soul. That's a good one. It's a bit more complex than Man's Search for Meaning. But again, you know, I think anybody who's literate, basically literate, who's got a bit of persistence can work their way through it. That's a great one. If you want to stretch yourself, anything Dostoevsky wrote, probably read Notes from Underground. Read those 3 books, man. That'll change your life, those 3 books. Notes from Underground is the study of it's a very short book. It's one of Dostoevsky's masterpieces. It's about a man who, well, he's confronting his own failure, essentially. That's why he's underground, you know, and it's a very honest book, and it's a story of his struggle with hopelessness and nihilism and cynicism and his rejection of a kind of naive and blind utopianism. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant book. Absolutely brilliant book. And those 3 books, they'll grip you. They're very interesting, and you could study them a long time, you know. If you study them enough, they'll make you wise. They're very, very deep books, and they're very short. I think each of them is about 110 pages, something like that. So, yeah, that's a really good. I have, by the way, on my website, I have a list of recommended books. There's about 100 of them, and if you make your way through any 10 of those, some of them are very, very difficult, and so don't start with those, because really they're books that, one of them, which you won't read in all likelihood, is called The Neuropsychology of Anxiety. It took me like 6 months to read that book. I had learned something new in every sentence. And so some of them are like that, and that's a lot. You could try cracking something by Nietzsche, like Beyond Good and Evil. You know, he wrote aphoristically, and so it's not a continuous book. It's paragraphs, and he said he philosophized with a hammer, and that's definitely true, man. So crack that book at your peril. But you know, you can just read one. Some of them are just aphorisms, 1 sentence long. You know, and yeah, that'll give you something to chew on.
Do you like going deep and chewing on those things, or more? Because I feel like a lot of people that read, it's like I read 52 books this year. Or you kind of like, chew on that one paragraph.
Depends on the book.
Okay.
You know, some books, I can read some books pretty much like
kind of through.
2 glances per page.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's an hour to get through a 200-page book, but some book, like those are books that contain ideas I'm already familiar with, and so, you know, I don't have to go into them in depth. But other books like, well, Beyond Good and Evil would be a good example. It's like, you can't read that book fast because there's so much information packed inside a single sentence. It could take you, like I just did a 8-hour lecture series on the first 1/3 of Beyond Good and Evil, and I only probably talked about 10 paragraphs.
Wow.
So, and Jung wrote he did a seminar on Thus Spake Zarathustra, which is kind of a revelatory book that Nietzsche wrote, and is 1,400 small print pages on the first third of a 100-page book. So, you know, a book like that you can't read fast. It's just not possible.
What do you do for fun? Just in like a short...
Torture social justice warriors. What do I do for fun? I really like music. So I've been recording music with a friend of mine up in Toronto, and so that's been an absolute blast. I play the piano. Awesome. I'm bad. I'm not good at it, but I can improvise, so I can come up with melodies. And he's a very good musician. So
I love music.
Yeah, it's great, man.
I actually made the track to the song that I did on stage.
Oh yeah. Well, there's nothing more fun than that. That's so great. And what else do I do for fun? Well, we've got a boat up at this cottage I have up north in Toronto, and we go out in the boat, and I spend quite a lot of time with my wife, and we do a lot of socializing, and that's probably, you know, when I see my grandkids, that's fun, and my kids, that's usually pretty fun, and so what else? And you know, well, but I should also say, like, I have a charmed life, you know. Everything I do is ridiculously interesting. It's way too interesting. It can really get to the point where your life is so interesting you can hardly stand it. I didn't know that was possible, but it's definitely possible. And so, you know, I don't feel generally like I need a break of leisure, because things are so intensely, what I'm doing is so intensely meaningful. And, you know, you said that I'm sort of embattled. I got a lot of friends and enemies. It's like I don't have very many enemies. You know, if you just look online, you'd think it's like enemies everywhere. It's like I never meet anybody in the public who gives me a rough time.
Yeah.
It's like never. I think I've probably met 75,000 people in the last 3 years, and like 3 of those encounters were negative. And one of them was a drunk woman in Dublin, and that doesn't even count. You know, so.
Who are like 1 or 2 really influential? You're like, I go to my friends, or I go to my coaches, my mentors. Like, who are some people that have really made an impact?
Oh, I got lots of people like that. Some of you might have watched Jonathan Pajot. If you haven't, you could. He has a podcast called This Symbolic World. Pajot's absolutely bloody brilliant. Deepest religious thinker I've ever seen. So Greg Hurwitz, former student of mine. He's a novelist, lives in California. He's great. My brother-in-law, Jim Keller. He's a world's greatest chip designer, probably the most dangerous person on the whole planet, with the possible exception of Elon Musk. And I really mean that. All your iPhones have Jim's chips in them. He designed all the chips for the Intel line, all the chips for AMD. Yeah, he's one dangerous character, and he's tough as a bloody boot, and you know, very blunt and forthright, and a very ethical person, and real good counsel. I got lots of people like that around me, and they've been helping me continually, you know, navigate this strange. I have people like that too all over the world now. So I got lots of people I can talk to if things get complicated.
Cool. And one last question.
All right.
Okay. Coming into a door-to-door convention, obviously we didn't get to speak before this. I don't know if you know much about the door-to-door sales world, solar roofing, past alarms, going out, hustling, soliciting. I guess what was your? I did a lot
of sales in my life, so I know something about it. Yeah.
What'd you sell?
I sold badly these tests that I designed when I was a professor at Harvard.
Oh, cool.
Although, you know, that eventually transformed into a series of successful businesses. But I did a lot of selling, and
cool. So what was kind of your, I guess, energetic intake or opinion or feedback that you'd give this community as you were able to speak and interact and kind of come in?
Well, I mean, I guess one thing I would like to say is, you know, one of the things, when I developed these tests, when I was working at Harvard, I was of the opinion that, you know, this cliche, if you build a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to your door. And when I first started selling and setting up a bit of a business around that, I assumed that it'd be like 15% of the revenue would be sales and marketing, and 85% would be devoted to revenue that was driven by the product. And that was just completely wrong. I didn't understand at all when I first started that it's like 85% sales and marketing, or maybe 95%. Yeah, it's unbelievable, you know. And so, and then I also, you know, I probably had some skepticism, the skepticism that people typically have about salespeople, you know, that kind of used car salesman thing. And first of all, I have a lot more respect for used car salesmen than I once did. But also, I do understand very deeply that it's very hard to be a good salesman. It's a very, very difficult job. Now, you can be spectacularly successful at it. And if you are, you're unbelievably useful, and you'll be in demand like you can't believe. But it's very hard, and you have to have a pretty damn thick skin, because there's a lot of, no, I'm not interested in sales, right? It's like, what, 90% that, or 95%? So, you know, you gotta be fortified pretty well against a whole array of obstacles. And then to be a really successful salesperson, you got to conduct yourself extraordinarily well across a long period of time. And so it can be an extraordinarily admirable and difficult enterprise. And so I think that's a good thing to know too, that, you know, that, and it's part of what makes the capitalist world roll forward. And there's never been a greater wealth-creating machine in the history of mankind than the capitalist world, and salespeople keep that rolling forward with all the excesses of the sales and marketing world, and there are plenty, you know, because you got to hype sugar water if you're going to sell Coca-Cola, you know, and there's moral hazard in that, but nonetheless, it's a very difficult job, and if people didn't do it well, nothing would happen at all with anything. You know, you make something great, researchers do that all the time. And politicians ask them, why can't you bring the product out in the marketplace? And politicians who ask that have never made a product, and they've never tried to sell anything. And so they think making a product and selling it, both of that's easy. And neither of those is easy, and doing both of them is just about impossible. And so even if you've got a great product, if you don't have a sales and marketing team that's stellar, it's going to go like nowhere. And so the sales and marketing people, they deserve a lot more respect than they generally get. And so, more power to you as far as I'm concerned.
I love that. Can we get a Hey, I will end on that gladly.
Good ending. Hey, it's good ending.
I just want to
all right.
Appreciate you. And
no
thank
problem.
You so
no
much
problem.
Coming.
Hey, just it might be useful to email the attendees and just send them a link to that self-authoring site. Yeah, it's just self-authoring.com. Self-authoring. Yeah.
We'll send that out.
Yeah, do send that out. And you can get in touch with Spencer, my secretary. And
he's a homie. Where you at,
yeah,
Spencer?
There he is, hanging out in the corner there.
You
Yeah.
got a good, you got a good.
Understand myself test or the
No, there's two tests that I have
I use
online.
your understand myself test in my organization.
Oh, you do? Good. Has it been useful?
We just
Oh, good.
We
Oh,
just
good.
took it as a group. A lot of us.
Oh, you did?
There's quite a few. We just did a training on it, so we'd love
Yeah.
to dissect more deep. Into
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing to know, to get to know yourself. And you know, I don't know if you know, but if you have a partner and they do the test, you get a joint report, eh?
Oh, cool.
You can unite the reports, and then the report will tell you where you're the same and where you're different, and you know what the consequences of that are going to be. Because lots of times in a marriage, part of the reason you fight is because you're actually different. It's not just because, you know, you're both mean and stupid, and you're probably both of those things too, but you're with someone who really is different, and it's hard to understand how different people are. Like, actually different, not just in opinion. You know, like extroverts, if you're really extroverted, no amount of socializing will wear you out. If you're introverted, it's like, especially really introverted, hardly any socializing wears you out, even if you get good at it. You know, you're better at one-on-one relationships, and maybe you like being alone in nature more, but those are real differences, and they can't just be hand-waved over. So Understand Myself gives you a personality report, and you can do it with your partner. And then the self-authoring program helps you do a biography. It's very useful to catch yourself up, to analyze your present faults and virtues. That's a useful thing to do. And then to write out a vision for the future. And you don't have to do all three of those. And if you had to do one, I'd do the future authoring. But if you do all three, you'll be standing on a lot firmer ground. You'll know who you are a lot better, and you'll have a hell of a plan. And it's hard. It's very hard to stop someone who's got a plan, you know. They're able to move forward against substantial resistance. And that's what you need in your life, because you're going to hit substantial resistance. So you better have a vision.
Let's go.